Say that again.
Yeah. So this is actually one of the newer thermal imaging cameras. The comparison I usually make with it is it's almost comparing an old standard definition TV to almost a 4K TV, comparing this one to the ones that we've had, the ones we got about 10 years ago. So this one you can actually get a pretty clear picture on. And this one actually has quite a few nice features. Unfortunately, you need to press one of the buttons and hold it to activate it. And the indicator that it's active is the little plus sign down in the corner. Once all the plus features are activated, you actually have a little compass down in the corner here, and that can kind of give you an idea which direction you're facing.
And is that relative to what a regular compass would be?
Correct.
Okay.
Also in this mode, you get several different heat signatures here. Right now it's in white hot, which is pretty much our standard. Generally what we usually use as far as that. Also along here you have a temperature gradient scale. Right now it's in high sensitivity mode. So basically anything that starts getting close to the 300 range here, you're going to start seeing yellows, oranges, and reds. Once a majority of the screen hits this temperature, it's actually going to change to low sensitivity mode or firefighting mode. And then these lower temperatures are going to stay in that white gray black range. And the hotter flame temperature stuff is going to be pretty much all the stuff that's red. Once it hits that mode, that's one of the indications that we're in an area that we probably need to start paying attention to flashover condition stuff along those lines. There's a lot of benefits to having a camera, along with some safety things that we need to still pay attention to. Just like every other electronic device, always have to worry about batteries. So they're kept on the charger. The newer cameras, the battery life on them seems to work out really well. If my memory serves me correctly, they are currently lithium-ion batteries. The older cameras are still operating off the NiCad batteries, which don't really keep it charged as long. They don't last as long, so you need to cycle the batteries a lot on those. So some of the other things I kind of already mentioned, that you don't really see holes in the floor too well. Depending on what you're looking at, I can actually walk you over here. We have a little doorway you can open that kind of hard to pick up on. If you come over here, you can kind of see a little bit of an outline of what looks like it might be a hole, but it's actually pretty difficult. If you're in a smoke-filled environment, and you're kind of crawling along, especially a lot of times when you're not going to have a nice, perfect rectangular opening there, you can kind of see how it'd be kind of difficult to distinguish that as a hole versus something else. One of the other big benefits to having the camera, it's actually going to give us a pretty good indication of the environment around us. We generally use it, I start using the camera pretty much from the time I get off the truck. Kind of going back again to the victim profiling, along with sizing up the structure. You can kind of take a look at the outside, see where your heat signatures are coming from, along with kind of reading the smoke and fire behavior of what's going on. Kind of get a good idea of what's going on inside. One of the other things you want to do, one of the general methods that we utilize the camera for is basically sweeping high, middle, and low. And that's going to give us a good idea of what the environment inside that particular room looks like. Basically, if we're seeing a lot of heat, especially up high, even starting to get towards the middle of the room, a lot of times what that's going to signify is we're probably going to be reaching flashover conditions. And if we're approaching without a hand line, we might want to get one of those in place before we proceed any further.
What is a hand line?
Just a fire hose.
Oh, okay.
So.
Can we see like one of them in like the lower range, the lower temperature range? Because they'll be more red, right? If I don't know if that makes sense. So you know how right now it'll start turning red at like 300 degrees Fahrenheit? Is there any way that can be lowered?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, 300 is, right now it's in high sensitivity mode, so that's the lowest it's going to get. So
if you're in a building and you see like a victim on the ground, they would be the same. They would be like the white color.
Right now, generally no, or yes, because we're in basically a lower temperature environment.
But if you were in a fire,
right,
they would be. What color would they typically show up?
They're generally going to be closer to like a gray or black because they're generally going to be a little bit cooler than what the environment is.
Oh, cooler. So you'll be you won't look warm. You'll look cooler. The victims will look cooler.
It's going to depend on. It's basically going to be depending on the circumstances. If
Right,
you're in a super heated room,
Right.
generally your body's going to be a little bit cooler than what the environment is.
Wow, okay.
But say you're in a bedroom that's separated from where the fire area is, and there aren't really any elevated temperatures in there, you probably will still show up a little bit white.
Okay. So is it easy or is it like how easy is it to like distinguish if you're in a fire, if you're in a situation, can you can use this to find victims, or is that not what this is used for?
We generally use this as far as finding victims. It's basically a combination of using the camera and feel.
What was that?
Using the camera and feel.
And
So
feeling
it's-
with your hand.
right.
Okay.
So it's not necessarily one thing or the other.
Okay.
The camera is definitely a great benefit. Makes things a lot easier to have one versus not.
Right.
But because of potential reliability issues and the trouble you can get yourself into by just kind of strictly
Right.
walking in around with the camera just like this,
Mm-hmm.
we generally try and teach guys to stay away from doing that. So
Okay.
still follow the same practices of having somebody on the wall following either a left-hand or right-hand search,
Right.
signing for stuff like that, just because of some of the safety things with
Right.
the camera itself.
Okay. We've heard of the technology, sometimes it can be mounted in your helmet. What do you think about that? And why you want it, maybe why you don't want it? Or why it's not recommended?
I've seen a couple different manufacturers that have that technology. I don't have enough hands-on time with it, especially in a fire environment, to say that it's generally one way or another.
Right.
I think the biggest concern with that is a lot of guys would kind of get tunnel vision with it. Some of the different manufacturers I've heard from some guys where it's placed, it can be kind of a distraction. So I think that's kind of one of the things that's in the phase. It just needs probably a little bit more research.
Got it. And then in terms of cost, do you know how much this costs? And then very expensive.
Expensive.
Yeah. And then would the helmet mounted be even more expensive probably? Or are you
I
not
honestly
sure?
don't know what the price of those are. I know it's factored into what the SCBAs are because they are actually the self-contained breathing apparatus. That's actually
wow.
what we wear as far as basic respiratory protection.
Right, okay.
It's usually those are usually attached to the face mask, so that usually gets factored into the cost with that. I know there is a cost increase with that. I'm not sure what it is.
Okay.
I know one of the manufacturers actually has a thermal imaging camera mounted in basically a pass device. That system seems like it works out fairly well. Again, I haven't had a lot of hands-on time with it. I think it'd be a little bit less distracting than having a mask-mounted camera, but again, I mean, I can't give you a full assessment.
Right, you
I
wouldn't.
haven't really much hands-on time with it.
Okay. Wow.
Personally, these, I mean, I'm actually pretty happy with this particular camera. We've actually had a couple of fires that, over the last few years, that I actually pretty much found the fire because of this.
Wow. Because you can see the differential, and that's where you
Right.
helps you find where the
Yeah,
source is.
between you using the information provided with the camera and in combination with the other information provided with the smoke barrier, with basically the smoke layer and all that kind of stuff, it does make it a lot easier. Again, like I said, kind of going back to the safety aspect of things, I mean, you still always want to have a good background and functioning without one and still follow all the safety practices as far as that.
Okay.
And you said it's dangerous to use when you're doing a right or left-handed search and using the camera at the same time?
Not necessarily. Basically, the way I would explain that would be when you're using the camera, you still need to follow good search practices. So you still need to have somebody in contact with the wall, not just go blindly walking in with the camera and following the camera alone.
Okay.
So can you describe the way when you go in a building, how do you search?
Okay. So pretty much what we're looking to do, and I can actually use this as an example. So when we approach the building, we do a good size up the building, see where we have smoke coming from, what the color of the smoke is, what the velocity of the smoke is, what kind of pressure it has. That's going to actually tell us a lot of things as far as what the size of the fire is, where in relation to that particular opening the fire may be, and that's one of the big things that we look at kind of starting off. After that, we're going to approach the front door, take a feel of the front door, see if we have any heat. If we already have heat at the front door, we're probably going to want to have a hose line in place as we're opening it. If not, feel the door for heat, check and see if it's locked or unlocked. If it's unlocked, obviously just open the door and walk in. If it is locked, at that point we're going to begin forcible entry proceedings. At that point, depending on what information we have as far as the location of the fire, if we have any reported areas or areas where we have victims reported to be, generally we're going to try and get an engine company going into the direction where we have the fire, and then a ladder company going in the direction where the people may be.
Are those companies groups of people?
Yes.
Okay.
So the way our apparatus is set up, each company consists of 4 members. We have a company officer, which is myself. We have a company chauffeur, which is our driver. Generally, if with the ladder company, the first engine company, they're pretty much responsible for operating the apparatus. Then we have 2 firefighters who ride in there. Their duties vary depending on basically what our assignment is as far as what our arrival assignment. So if you're the first, second, or third of the engine company, and which particular seat you're sitting on which rig. So generally, the guy behind me on the truck is going to be our main forcible entry guy. He's going to carry the halligan, which I showed you guys, along with the flat-headed axe. The guy behind the driver is going to carry actually a 2.5 gallon water can and a 6-foot roof hook. Then again, like I said, if we're the first dude ladder truck, usually the driver's going to be operating the truck. As far as the engine companies, the guy behind the driver is going to be our nozzle firefighter, so he's going to be responsible for bringing the hose line in. The guy behind the driver is going to be the hydrant firefighter, so he's going to be responsible for taking the hydrant. So once we kind of figure out where we're going, open our door, take a look in with the camera. Again, scan high, scan around the middle, and then scan low. Again, trying to basically get a good mental picture of what the conditions are inside. Get an idea what the thermal area in the building is. Proceeding on, generally depending on what the smoke conditions are, usually the adage we go by is if you can see your feet, you can walk. If you can't see your feet, then you're going to start either crouching or crawling. Personally, I prefer crouching just because you have a better visual of what's going on around you. Whereas a lot of times, you see it more in recruit school. You'll see guys crawling and their head down and really not looking at a whole lot of anything other than the floor. Other than falling through a hole in the floor, which is why you're going to carry a tool inside the floor, the only thing that's going to kill you on the floor is a hole. All the dangerous stuff that can get you into trouble or get you in jackpots can be all up high. Basically, all the different issues as far as smoke, fire conditions, stuff like that. All the issues with that are all going to be up high. Again, crouching versus crawling is going to provide you better information as far as that. So at this point, once I get inside the doorway again, I'm going to take a good look around, see what kind of layout I have. Again, scanning high, middle, low, looking at fire conditions. For our particular purpose here, we're going to go to the left. So generally I'm going to have somebody along with me out front of me. They're probably going to be the wall guy, along with the tool again for the reasons why I outlined earlier. So we work our way around. We come to a door here. So again, we're going to feel the door, check for heat. If we don't have any heat, we're going to open the door. Generally, depending on the type of door we have, is going to kind of give us a couple bits of information. Depending on mainly whether the door opens inward or outward. So generally, as far as the direction that doors open, doors that are going to open in are either going to be, or basically going to be occupied rooms, either bedrooms. Most homes anymore, as far as living spaces, living rooms and dining rooms and such, aren't going to have doors on them anymore. In the past, a lot of times you have double doors that also are going to open inwards. Outward opening doors generally are going to be typically closets, or if you're on the first floor, you may come across those going into the basement, which is also a very important piece of information that we need to know. One, what the where the location, the entrance to the basement is, and do we have anything going on down there as far as fire conditions. Pretty much the most dangerous place for us to occupy or us to operate is going to be above a fire, especially one that we don't know that we're above. So finding the basement early on and finding out that yes or no there's fire in the basement early on is pretty good important information to know. So once we check the door, we know we don't have heat. We want to try and potentially, especially if we have an outward opening door, use the door pretty much as a shield. Open the door, again, take a look up high, see what our fire conditions are up high, scanning across the room, back across the middle, and then down across the floor. And once the door's open, we know we don't have anything inside. Proceed inside. Again, pretty much sweeping high, middle, low with the camera. Again, I mean, this is going to be a multi-person operation, so I'm not going to be the only one here with the camera. I'll also have somebody else with me, preferably having a wall guy along with the second firefighter to be sweeping around searching. Couple different operations we can have. Generally, with experienced guys, you usually want to try and keep each other in physical contact. Once you have some more experienced guys you're used to working with, you can usually spread out and stay in voice contact, pretty much just talking back and forth, letting each other know what you have, what you're finding, stuff like that. If you don't hear somebody yelling back at that point, you know you're in a problem. So again, we're always going to have somebody in contact with the wall that we came in on. They're basically our primary orientation person. Again, as far as cameras, I mean, they're a wonderful tool to have, but you don't want to primarily rely on this as a means of egress, because if the battery dies on it, something happens that God forbid it gets ripped off your gear and gets lost, you're pretty much stuck out in the middle of nowhere with no way out. So always want to have somebody on the wall. The other thing that's going to do for you is it's also going to kind of give you a better orientation of the room. They're pretty much going to be searching for victims along the wall, additional doorways, stuff like that. In addition to windows, windows are a big thing to find, because they're actually basically a secondary means of egress if we need to use them. If we come across a victim, especially if we're deep into a building, we're generally not going to want to try and drag them all the way back to the building, because one of the biggest things that they don't have that we do is a breathable air supply. So the quicker that we can get them out of the building, the better off they are. So, we pretty much progress into the room, continuing to sweep. Once we've completed a search of the area, we proceed back out. If we have a smaller room, one of the things you can potentially do is leave your camera guy at the door and have one guy sweep the room while you're keeping an eye on him. That always works out really well.